Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. Time for Thrive, turning uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I've got a real powerhouse for you today. I have the Jeff Shore as our guest. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
The Jeff Shore. The Jeff Shore.
That's
Thank you, Meredith. I'm honored deeply. Thank you.
Well, I thought that was a good introduction. Listen, there are so many things that I want to talk about with you today as it
Yeah.
relates to uncertainty, growth, and being the guru in the real estate industry. Things are definitely interesting and timely right there, right now. Jeff, and everything that I was reading about you, I mean, you are really, a sales guru, an expert in the real estate industry. But where did it start for you? And where did this whole psychological approach? I love the line that you use. I mean, really, the description is to sell the way that customers want to buy. So basically, take us back to the beginning. How did you get to where you are, and where did this passion to really sell in a unique way come about?
If you understand your buyer well enough, that sales path will roll out right in front of you. And I think so often we're so consumed with how we want to sell that we don't stop and think about, well, how does the buyer want to buy? And so it really goes back to my days selling homes many, many years ago. And when I first joined the industry, it was an upslope industry. Everything was great, and the market was on the rise. And then somebody hit the switch, and it just tanked. And I was this close to being out of the sales business altogether. And my boss at the time, longtime mentor, still a good friend, said, "Hey, we got to figure this out." And went back to square one with, "Hi, my name is Jeff." But I matched up with a guru of my own, a peer of mine who I just thought was brilliant about turning me on to the idea of studying the way that people want to buy in the first place. And so from there, I just studied it deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to get into the psychology of a purchase decision. I just find it so fascinating the way that the machinations that take place in somebody's brain when they're thinking about making a decision. I find it really interesting.
I also wonder too, as we head into an uncertain marketplace, or we're in an uncertain marketplace, or whatever the
Yeah.
heck is going on right now. I just came from a speaking engagement, listening to two people give completely different descriptions of the state of the industry, which I thought was really funny, which set me up perfectly to get on stage and talk about uncertainty. But do people, as the media, as the society starts to paint a picture of a shifting economy and shifting in a negative way, whether it's valid or whether it's valid or not. Do how people make decisions? Do you have to adjust your style based on where people feel and their attitudes, I guess, toward the
Mhm.
marketplace?
Uh, a forward answer to that, dramatically.
Yeah.
So there you go. There is no question about it. Look, you go back to decision making 101. We make decisions according to the expected outcome. Well, that's the theme of this podcast, right? If the expected outcome is foggy, if it's unclear, well, now what do you do? And we're coming off of, I live in the real estate space, just as an example of that. We're coming off a decade of a rising market where you got rewarded over and over again. Now, suddenly, you see interest rates at the time of this recording edging near 8%. You see Gallup polls that say only 18% of Americans say that it's a good time to buy a home. You're flying right in the face of all of those headwinds coming against you. And you're looking and you're saying, am I about to make the biggest financial decision of my life? Of course, there's uncertainty. And so somebody has to step in because there's a crisis of confidence right now amongst buyers who are thinking about buying not just homes, but any big ticket purchase. Somebody has to be able to step in and provide that confidence. And I think the confidence is contagious, but you have to recognize as a sales practitioner the confidence that used to belong to the market isn't there anymore. That's where you come in. So it's where we see influence practitioners really shine markets like this.
I love this idea of an influence practitioner. I mean, I've always said to the people that I'm working with, I mean, people are buying the energy that comes off of you. And if you
Yep.
are desperate, you are fearful, you aren't confident. And that's why I say that uncertainty, being confident in the face of uncertainty, is a competitive advantage because most of your competitors are fearful. And if
Mhm.
you go in there, people want to gravitate towards somebody who has a plan. How do you begin to position yourself or really define an influence practitioner, what it is, why it's important, and then some of the steps or things that you need to do around that to become one?
I think it begins by having such a solid, strong belief in your own value that it becomes easy to defend. It's easy to be able to share that confidence. So I'll just give you an example of this, and I'll give you just a little peek behind the curtain on this one. I normally don't say this, so this is just for you here.
Okay, great.
But internally, with my team of 15 people at Shore Consulting, I like to sort of jokingly say, at Shore Consulting, we are the high price leader. Nobody charges more than us. And if we find somebody who charges more, we will gladly match their price and raise 10%. Now, look, I'm not saying that to try and, bilk more money out of client. That's not the goal. The goal is to add so much value that I can't be compared on price. I don't want to be the low price leader. I don't want to be the value a leader. I want to provide so much value in what it is that I do, that if you want to take somebody else's services or offerings that and pay less, you can, but you're simply not going to get that. So it begins with that gut check. How strongly do I believe in my value in order to want to persuade somebody along those lines? Because that, again, that confidence is contagious, and that begins with the confidence in my own value.
So then let me ask this question because I think it's interesting. I mean, there you are in the real estate space. What was value, a couple of years ago may not be the same value that a
Correct.
customer is looking for now. How do you stay current with that? I mean, how do you, because it's one thing to build confidence in your value. How do you know enough what value is to begin to build confidence in it? Because I
Yeah,
think
that's a
it's so important.
is such an important question because we have to recognize that value is not a seller word. Value is a buyer word, right?
Yes.
It's like integrity. I can say I have integrity, but you're the one who's going to decide whether I really do. And it's the same thing with value. It's a perception. And so when we think about what value has been in the real estate market, really over the last 10 years, there has been value in the real estate market. That is, that if I buy today, I believe that I will be paid back in the form of higher prices all along the lines. So then, if there's uncertainty, that value piece moves away. What replaces it? Now, what I have been impressing upon my clients is this is great. This is a fresh start. It's a chance to get people who are thinking about buying a home back to what really matters, which is not the market, it's the home. How do we get people back to what they're really trying to do here? Now, I'm talking in a real estate language, but I think for any sales practitioner out there, they can look at it and say, what are you really selling? What is that core value? How does that come out across most significantly to your buyer? So if you're just trying to look at it and say, well, our features are this, and this, that might be important to you, but value is only value if the buyer says it's value.
Yeah, I really can't agree. So you really figure out value by really, really listening to the
You
customer and
really do.
what's going on with them. I also think that an uncertain marketplace is such a great time to grow your own business because most of your competitors pull back. Something I was just speaking with a group of insurance agents here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was saying to them, I mean, the last thing you want to do, they're in a quote unquote hard market. I don't know what you call it in the real estate world, but in the insurance market, we call it a hard market right now. And it's most of your competitors will pull back, which is all the more reason you should lean in. Because I think in an uncertain marketplace, customers need you now more than they needed you, even when the economy was good. So just curious your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, listen, one of the reasons why I think a lot of competitors pull back is because they too were riding that market. It wasn't just that the buyers were being rewarded by the market, but many people who are in that, they would say, "Oh, I'm all that. Look at my success. Look at my numbers. Look at my BMW, whatever it is." And all of those might have been gifted to you to some extent by the market, or as Warren Buffett puts it, when the tide goes out, you figure out who's been swimming naked, right? So you could look at it and say there was a lot of pretenders out there in the first place. And I think market corrections have that, and not to be crude about it, but a huge flushing effect of people that
Yes.
perhaps should not be there in the first place. This is a chance to prove who really belongs to stay in the race. And some markets, just free markets, have that way. They're able to show us. And so this is the time, absolutely, to, again, quoting Warren Buffett, be fearful when others are greedy, be greedy when others are fearful. This is time to lean into the opportunities while other people are saying, geez, maybe I'm going to go pave roads for a living. And nothing wrong with paving roads, but maybe you should have been doing that in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. I remember back in the day when everybody was flipping houses before 2008, was making money like crazy, and then the bottom fell
Absolutely.
out of the market, and everybody thought, "Well, this is awful. This is wrong." And I thought, how come you're okay with everything that's going on when you're making money hand over fist, but you don't think there should be any kind of correction
Yeah.
in it?
Well,
Yeah,
you certainly see it with the buyers who complain about sellers or builders who are raising the price so much, and we have to look at it and go, okay, fair enough. When you go to sell a house, are you going to be that altruistic to say, you know what, my home is worth this, but man, I just feel bad about you paying that, so I'll only charge you that. That's just not what's going to happen. Let's be
yeah,
honest.
exactly. So when it comes to figuring out how people want to buy, and in other words, I mean, I feel like that's a lot of is that like the first step of connection? Because if I'm trying to figure out how you want to buy, I would assume you would feel some level of connection because I'm more invested in you than I am invested in myself. So what do you when you think about that is where do you begin the process of even trying to figure out how people want to buy?
Yeah, well, there's no question about it. I need to learn something that's going to be really, really important. Above everything else is that I need to learn their base motivation for why they walked through the door or went on a website or picked up the phone in the first place, right? So I need to be able to start there. But in order to start there, there has to be enough trust established that they'll want to tell me that story. And so this is one of the things that I'm concerned about when I'm out shopping because for people like you and I, Meredith, it's just an occupational hazard. We judge sales
Oh,
professionals. We can't help it, right? And what we see is I don't typically see salespeople who are rude or mean. I just see them as kind of there with all the joy and enthusiasm you would expect to find at the post office.
right.
But that's not gonna cut it. We have got to step it up because the link between likability and trust is critical. And if I decide that I like you early on because you're bringing your best positive energy right away, I will decide that I trust you right away, and then I can get to tell me what's happening in your life that caused you to be here in the first place. Why somebody is thinking about moving or buying or whatever it is, that's where this whole thing starts. What they're moving to, th- I would say the overwhelming majority of salespeople in all industries are so consumed with what a customer is moving to that they neglect to fully understand what their customer is coming from. And if you figure out what they're coming from, you'll figure out what they're moving to. That's the core. The why is so much more important than the what.
In all honesty, sometimes customers don't even know what they're moving to. I mean, it's
It's
one
true.
reason they kind of need you. Back when I was a banker, I used to have people ask me for products and services all the time that were the wrong fit for them. And it wasn't their job to know the fit. I really needed to understand what the problem was, and then then I could align them to that. So, Jeff, why is sales training so not aligned to figuring out how people wanna buy. I've kind of been obsessed with this thought process really since about the late '90s, back when, I came up in the days of the art of the cross sell, the upsell, the art of the close.
Yeah,
Everything that was about me getting the sale and
right.
not about the buyer having a good experience. And I've always thought to myself, no wonder people hate sales, right? I
Yeah.
mean, everything about it feels uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So why is that so off track?
Yeah, I think we're asking salespeople to sell even against their own skill set with much of the training that we provide, we being the global industry of sales trainers. We fall in love with our model. This is the way the process works. I know it'll work, dang it, because one guy in Ottumwa, Iowa figured it out. And so you could do it too. And that, by the way, is one of my pet peeves is when a trainer says, well, I did it this way and therefore it'll work for you. It's like, well, guess what? I'm not you. So I think we have to train in models more than scripts, and the scripts just drive me up the wall. And I've gone toe to toe with sales trainers who said you have to use scripts, you have to memorize scripts, and I just fundamentally disagree. I don't think you can speak my words effectively any more than I can speak your words effectively. So we need models, we need patterns, we need structure for sure. But if you can't put your own personality into that, you're going to fail. That is providing that training. But I think the other side of it is that we oftentimes miss something, and that is when we think about behavioral change, which is what we want from sales training. There are actually three components there. There's the message itself, which would ostensibly be delivered by a sales trainer. There is the recipient of the message, the sales practitioner, and then there's a coach. And if that coach cannot connect the training and education over here into what's actually done by the salesperson, then you'll only get a very small fraction of salespeople who will fully adopt what the trainer is saying. So I would argue that there is that it's a three-legged stool. If there is no coach there to be able to say, let me take what you've given us here and then work it day after day after day to make sure that it becomes a habit of the salesperson, then we're probably going to fall short. And I've just seen over and over again, oftentimes sales managers who are like, oh, yeah, sales trainer, do your thing. I'm going to be answering emails. I'm like, are you kidding me? So, this is, I think fundamentally, you've got to have something that reinforces the training when the training's not going to work in the first place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing about, training is fabulous, but then you get out on the sale, it's kind of like, I mean, I love to play golf and I can hit on the practice tee all day long and I get out on the course and it's a different animal. And so,
It is.
sales training is fabulous, but every sales call is different. Every experience is different. And you have to be able to connect the dots in your own head, which is what a good coach can help you to do. So,
But there's one other thing, if you don't mind here, that I think we have to look at, and that is that in that coaching session, we have to get salespeople comfortable with how to fail effectively.
yes.
And salespeople don't like to do that, and it's human nature. We don't like to do it. But I'll just give you a quick little example of this. Last year, I turned 60 last year, and I've been playing hockey for several years. I said I'm going to learn how to play goalie. Okay, so I hired a coach. I said, teach me how to play goalie. So the very first game that I played, in fact, the very first shot that was taken, it floated up in the air and I batted it out of the way and directly into my own net. Okay. The first shot that I ever faced, I batted. Now there's video. I could show you a video of this that will show you that that puck was not going in the net. All I had to do was not be there and the team wouldn't have scored. Okay.
Great.
Now, how embarrassing do you think that was? Right? I mean, on the film, you could see the body language of my own players going, oh, so this is what we're left with a goalie right now. It was horribly embarrassing, which means that I have two choices: quit or get better. And when we look at coaching for salespeople, if they are too afraid to get uncomfortable by failing in that practice, then they will give up on that technique and they'll go back to whatever it is that they're doing until coaches can provide an atmosphere where it's safe to fail, where that becomes a learning environment, a happy environment, because I know I can get better, then that training is always going to fall short.
Yeah, I could really not agree more with that. In fact, I feel like so much of sales is because so much of the accountability is just on getting the result. People fail because maybe they're not failing as bad as hitting their own puck into the net, but something's broken. Like they sold
Yeah.
one product where they could have gone six deep with
Yeah.
it because, but they don't go in there. I was terrified to get into sales, but I was in a
We,
position.
we all were.
Yeah, exactly, nobody likes it.
Yeah.
But anyway, but my boss, when I started, I had a phenomenal boss, and he asked me, he said, "Will you go out on a sales call with me?" I said, "Great." He set it up, he did everything, wanted me to observe him. And he was a very quick start personality, and we got in there, and he finally said to the customer, "How could we get your business?" And the customer said, "I already am a customer of your bank." Like, it was total failure, like, my boss had stepped in it, and we got back in the car, and he laughed, and he said, "Well, that's why you need to pre-call play," and I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but he blew it off like failing was no big deal, and what do we learn from that, Meredith?
Yeah.
And went on from there. And it's funny, here I am, God, like 36 years later, still remembering that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll never forget the first goal that I let in, but I can promise you this. That was 2 years ago. I have not done that since.
Yeah.
If the puck's not going in the net, I don't touch the puck.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea. But it's because the failure was so pronounced that it actually aided me. But I think human nature says, I want to be comfortable. I don't want to get into that spot where people, if there is one surefire way not to fail, and that's just sort of not to try in the first place, or just give it a half-hearted attempt because the manager is watching, but I'm going to go back to the way that I've always done it.
I love this idea that we're talking about coaching because I think coaching is so underrated. And when
Yeah.
pressure gets on the numbers, it's one of the first things, it's one of the first pieces that goes. But this year at National Speakers Association, Nito Quabain brought in Mark Randolph from Netflix. And he was really talking about his, with Netflix and him trying to sell it to Blockbuster and everything. But what he was talking about, I found really fascinating when they said, "What are you passionate about now?" And he said the difference between knowledge and information, that a lot of times information is, like you said, a script. I mean, you know what to do, but the knowledge is understanding why it works and why it doesn't work so that you can make the adjustments. And he showed this little film where he showed people riding a bike, and we all know how to ride a bike. And then he took a bike and he moved the handlebars and he changed the brakes and the wheels so that things didn't work like they typically would work. And people couldn't figure out how to make it work because people don't have the knowledge to really understand how to ride a bike. And I'm going to get to my point because I think this is really the crux of a lot of what you do and what's different, that can really be valuable to people is you mentioned hockey. I took up tennis 5 years ago. I've played golf my whole life, but I took up tennis 5 years. Been the most humiliating thing I've ever done. But finally, I'm coming over the crest. But it has been so much, and I see people that I played with 5 years ago that are still at the same level because they quote unquote have the information to play tennis. But it is about the knowledge. I understand when I hit a ball right, and I understand when I hit a ball wrong. I still hit a ball wrong, but I understand so that I can correct it going forward. So that was really long-winded, but I really feel like that's a fundamental difference in a lot of what you do and how you think when it comes to doing a lot of sales training.
I think that it's a great analogy, and I think you are absolutely right. Well, look, Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach, he says all change begins by telling the truth. If we don't know what that truth is about our own performance, then there is no motivation to change and therefore no change. And so we've that's and again, that's where coaches come into play.
Yeah.
They're going to teach you the smallest tweak on that tennis shot in order to make sure, okay, you did this. Why did that happen? Let's break it down. Let's figure it out. And I think the same thing happens in sales training. So if ultimately you picked up tennis 5 years ago, and my guess is that when you first picked it up on those first days, you were thinking about things like how exactly to hold the racket.
Yeah,
Okay. My guess is you don't think very much now about how to hold the racket. And
right.
what happens, I think, in skill development, whether it's tennis or hockey or sales, is that if we're doing this right in the progression, we're actually not trying to pick up skills. We're trying to pick up habits.
Mm,
So with sales training, I can teach skills, but I can't teach habits. That's where coaches do. The skill development there will get you started, but it is the repetition that will turn it into a habit. And the difference is that skills are optional, habits are not. So that's the same thing. If I'm playing goalie, how much time do I have to determine whether I should stand up when a shot's coming or go down on my knees when a shot's coming? The decisions cycle is about like that.
yeah.
I don't have time to process it. It has to be habitual because I've seen that shot in practice so many times. Same thing in sales. We've got to be able to look at it and say, here's the skill that I want to use. It's this return on an objection. It's handling this closing approach. It's sharing this value proposition, whatever it happens to be. If I have to think about it too much, then I'm not able to be freed up to think about my customer. I'm only thinking about myself, and that's not good sales.
Yeah, which I think is, it's interesting to me, the fight of the role play and things like that, because it's, I finally, my tennis coach finally said to me, he said, "You become well, he used a swear word, a pretty tennis player." He said, "It's only taken about 150,000 balls." You
It's about right.
you know, but that is what it has taken, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's taken that. What's hard to believe, we are about at the end of this show, and I always like to close with two questions. You can
Sure.
answer them any way you want to. So number one, how do people find out more about you? How do they find more about the trainings and
Yeah.
your
Yep.
big sales conference? And the second is if you had one piece of advice as we look at people heading in to 2024, where should people put their time, their energy if they want to thrive in uncertainty?
Okay. Well, first of all, you can find everything at jeffshore.com. That includes our Saturday morning 5-minute sales training videos, whatever it is, jeffshore.com. Or you can email me, jeff@jeffshore.com. And if there is one thing that I would look at, I'm actually going to repeat something that I said earlier, but I want to use it as a challenge right now. Most salespeople are consumed with what their customer is moving to. You can be one of the 5% of salespeople out there that are consumed with what the customer is coming from. And if you can get a good sense of the pain in their life right now, of the problem that needs to be solved, everything else falls out right in front of you. But the customer is so used to the same questions, the same drolling on and on and on about how great your product is. Take an interest in their life, figure out why they are there in the first place. If you figure out what they're coming from, you'll figure out what they're moving to.
Oh, that is brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, your
It
energy,
was
your
fun. It
wisdom.
was fun.
Really, really great conversation. Thanks to
Yeah.
all of you for joining us for another episode of Thrive. And together, we are going to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I'll see you next week.